Hello there kids. In today's episode of Wildlife Diseases of the World, we will follow Team Africa as they show us the many diseases across the continent. Take it away, team.
Oh my gosh, children, look! There's an elephant!
What, Mr. Elephant? Why are you so sad?
It appears that this elephant has been affected with broken heart syndrome. Many people are not aware that elephants can actually die from a broken heart, and the main symptom will be sudden death. It's typically due to being transported away from familiar environments or losing their stablemate. It's most common in young elephants, and this disease can actually occur in a lot of different organisms. Do you guys want to hear about another disease that affects elephant hearts? Great! Another disease that affects elephant hearts is encephalomyocarditis. Its causative agent is a virus belonging to the Picornaviridae family. It's a non-enveloped icosahedral virus. It's RNA single-stranded, and it replicates in the myocardial cells of the heart. The major hosts include great apes, livestock, dogs and cats, elephants, and many other mammals. The reservoir host appears to be rodents, especially multi-mammite rats in Africa. This is the major rodent of concern involved in elephant infection. It has appeared in many different countries, including the US and parts of Australia, as well as different countries in Africa. The major concern was the outbreak that happened in the free-roaming elephants in Kruger National Park in South Africa. This disease is a potential zoonosis, although it is not already classified as being a zoonosis because it has been apparent to appear on serology tests, surveying tests, in humans as subclinical infections. Also, it hasn't been seen to be dramatically infectious to humans, but there are human cases, and it has been sporadically isolated from children with aseptic meningitis, encephalomyelitis, and
Guillain-Barré syndrome.
Are you guys ready to learn about the signs and the transmission of this crazy, heartbreaking disease? Okay, come on, guys! Hello, second Mr. Elephant. I see that you are infected with EMC. Do you know how you got this disease? Transmission of EMC is via the fecal-oral route. It is from rodents excreting waste into water and food supplies for elephants. And this, kids, is how you know if an elephant has been infected with EMC. Affected elephants, there are two forms of the signs and symptoms. The first one is the paracute, and that's sudden death. The second type of infection is the acute. Signs of congestive heart failure will ensue, such as depression, listlessness and lethargy, reluctance to move, and moderate to severe dyspnea, which means labored breathing, guys. Tremor of the distal trunk, sucking, trip of the trunk, and increased trunk activity, recumbency, collapse, and anorexia, frothy trunk discharge, and this will often remain even after overcoming the initial infection. Signs of colic, such as diarrhea. Neurological signs may develop, but are much less common. I can't anymore. Hi! Do you guys remember how I was mentioning that this was a potential zoonosis? Great! The symptoms in humans include fever, chills, nausea, headache, nuchal rigidity, delirium, delusions, vomiting, photophobia, and lastly, pleocytosis. A few of the gross lesions associated with EMC include heart enlargement, a pale myocardium in the heart, and you will see lesions of the lungs consistent with pneumonia. For diagnosing this disease, it's very difficult because the progression of it is so rapid that you really will not have time to obtain a firm diagnosis before the animal will most likely die from congestive heart failure. But if you do have time, you can do EMCV specific neutralizing tests for antibodies and serum, ELISA tests, you can culture from myocardial tissue, and then you can do reverse transcriptase polymerase chain reaction. Lastly, guys, is prevention and treatment. I know this is super important to you because you want to save all of the elephants. Yay! You can prevent this disease by mostly rodent control. You can also treat the disease with anti-serum, antiviral drugs, fluid therapy, steroids, and antihistamines. There has been use of antibiotics and stimulants, but this has proven to be very unsuccessful. In South Africa, in Kruger National Park, when they had the large outbreak that ended up with a lot of deaths of animals, especially the elephants, they made a live vaccine, and it did prove to be successful, but it has not been used anywhere else other than in Kruger National Park. And now we're going to shift our focus from elephants to rhinoceros diseases.
Hey there, kids. We're on the search for the Diceros bicorns, otherwise known as the black rhino. Hey there, Mr. Rhino. You're looking pretty tired there. You must have hemolytic anemia. The agent that causes hemolytic anemia isn't really known. There is no causative agent for this. But there is primary hemolytic anemia, which is caused by no obvious agents or any underlying diseases. There's secondary hemolytic anemia, which is caused as a product of another disease. That mechanism isn't really known though. Hemolytic anemia is when red blood cells are destroyed and it overwhelms the bone marrow's ability to reproduce these blood cells. There are no distinct hosts for hemolytic anemia. It's pretty widespread. It is non-zoonotic, however. Symptoms for this disease include fatigue, heavy breathing, enlarged spleen, increased heart rate, jaundiced eyes, and death. There are no visible gross lesions on this animal. It causes 40% of the deaths in captive black rhinos in the United States. But what causes hemolytic anemia in these rhinos? We're still unclear. Even in humans, it could be due to several diet factors, specifically in the rhino, fava beans. Recent research has discovered that rhinos' red blood cells are very deficient in ATP, and this is due to a deficiency in glucose 6-phosphatase. Diagnosis for this disease can be done through complete blood count tests, packed cell volume, Combs test, and urinalysis. Treatment for hemolytic anemia in these rhinos is mainly supportive therapy and restoration of fluids in the rhino. You can also perform blood transfusions and paternal phosphorus supplementation. The next disease on our agenda is mucocutaneous ulcerative syndrome. The causative agent for this disease is Staphylophila denichi, and it is a filarial parasite. This disease causes raised plaques on the rhino that develop into debilitating skin ulcers. This disease only affects rhinos, so it's non-zoonotic. The primary location for this disease would be in areas where rhinos are prevalent. This would be the perimeter around the Democratic Republic of the Congo or parts of Middle Africa. So far, in captivity, 45 cases have been discovered in rhinos in zoos. That's pretty interesting. Symptoms in the black rhino include bilateral superficial necrotic lesions on the lateral and ventral thorax of the rhino, incapacitating ulcers, and even death. Transmission for this disease is proposed to be by a blood-sucking arthropod. Diagnosis could be seen through gross observation and blood smear. You can prevent this through treatment with ivermectin or long-lasting amoxicillin. And now we'll take it to my friend Colin to talk about the lion.
Hey there, kids. Today we're going to look at some diseases that affect the king of the jungle. Do you know who that is? Great, let's go. Oh, hey there, Mr. Lion. Have you ever heard of feline parvovirus? Did you know it was the first ever viral disease ever identified in cats? Isn't that cool, kids? Did you know, Mr. Lion, that feline parvovirus used to be called feline infectious enteritis or feline panleukemia, and was also the first leading cause of death by a virus for all cats? Did you know feline parvovirus cannot affect domestic or non-domestic cats and can be seen across the globe? What do you think, kids? Do you think this disease is zoonotic? Great! It's not zoonotic! You could tell if Mr. Lion here has feline parvovirus if he shows signs of depression, loss of appetite, high fever, vomiting, severe diarrhea, and nasal discharge. Isn't that gross, kids? Mr. Lion here will surely die if he doesn't get help. So let's go. Remember, kids, to keep your cat away from an infected cat's urine, stool, and nasal discharge. And know that the virus can survive in the environment here for over a year. Vaccines do exist for feline parvovirus, so don't be scared, Mr. Lion. I'll get a vaccine before you die. Oh, hey kids, let's talk about canine distemper. But wait, why would we talk about canine distemper for Mr. Lion? It turns out canine distemper can affect numerous domestic animals and even wildlife species. Canine distemper was first reported in Europe by a French veterinarian named Henri Carré. You can tell Mr. Lion has the disease if he starts seizing, foaming at the mouth, and has partial or complete paralysis. Make sure not to confuse this with rabies, kids. Canine distemper can spread via airborne exposure and can also spread through shared food and water. And also mothers can give it to their kids through their placenta. Ew! A veterinarian can diagnose this disease looking at the symptoms or blood tests or using an immunofluorescent assay. Also, vaccines exist for dogs, but not for Mr. Lion, so he will surely die. It's time for me to go, kids, but before I go, let's take the time to watch this segment by our sponsors. Oh, hi, Colin Flynn here with a great offer. Are you having trouble getting those pesky participation points? With the $19.95 monthly subscription, we can get a lookalike to show up in class and annoy the professor to make sure you get a 100 in your grade. Here's what a client had to say about us.
I'm pretty lazy. I only got an 80, so it was alright.
Great! If you order now, you get nothing extra, because this is an amazing deal. Now back to you, Team Africa.
Howdy kids, Wildlife Specialist Josh here. Today I'm here to tell you about Cape buffalo. Did you know that Cape buffalo are very capable swimmers and have an incredible memory? However, these awesome animals also have very serious diseases that come along with them. Let me tell you about a couple of them. First, let's talk about Rift Valley Fever, or RVF. Can you guess where Rift Valley Fever got its name? That's right, Kenya Rift Valley in Africa. Rift Valley fever has had 2 noticeable outbreaks in the past 50 years. Once in 1950 through 1951, where 100,000 plus animals were infected, and once in 1977, with 90,000 people infected and over 500 people dying. The most common hosts of RVF are sheep, cattle, and other domestic animals, with wild animals being known reservoirs such as Cape Buffalo. RVF is most commonly found in East and Southern Africa, with only 1 report being outside of Africa, which was in Saudi Arabia. How do you know if your buffalo is infected with the RVF virus? It's a great question. RVF virus has very noticeable signs and symptoms in animals. These signs being sudden abortions, high fever with nasal and ocular discharge, profuse diarrhea, vomiting, and severe jaundice. Because this disease is zoonotic, yes, that means humans can get it too. Humans have their own set of signs and symptoms. In 90% of cases, humans relatively don't see any signs, and if so, they only get mild headaches, fevers, and dizziness. However, in 8 to 10% of cases, humans can experience ocular diseases, encephalitis, and hemorrhagic fever. Humans can contract the RVF virus by coming in direct contact with infected blood, body fluids, or body tissues, along with getting bitten by mosquitoes which are carrying the RVF virus. Wild Cape buffalo and other animals can contract this disease through infected mosquitoes. When mosquitoes bite the animal, they can transmit the disease through blood and infecting the buffalo. Seasons of RVF is known to come in higher occurrences with high seasons of rain and flooding. This is due to the fact that mosquitoes are more prevalent with high standing water and rain. Now let's talk about the next disease, bovine tuberculosis. But first, let's go catch back up with our old friend, Mr. Buffalo. Howdy, Mr. Buffalo. Did y'all know that bovine tuberculosis has been eradicated in most developing countries? However, bovine tuberculosis has not been eradicated in most third world countries and still remains a very large threat to endangered animals and species. Common signs of bovine tuberculosis is low-grade fever, weakness, emaciation, and coughed/labored wheezing. But how does Mr. Buffalo get bovine tuberculosis? There are 3 key factors that cause Mr. Buffalo to get bovine tuberculosis, being inhalation, ingestion, or through breaks through the skin of the Mycobacterium bovis responsible for bovine tuberculosis. If our friend Mr. Buffalo was in a developed country such as the United States, he would not have to concern himself with bovine tuberculosis, as it has been eradicated in most developed countries. However, here in Africa, we have not eradicated bovine tuberculosis, and it is a great concern for Mr. Buffalo. We do have prevention methods, though, that can greatly reduce the chances of Mr. Buffalo contracting bovine tuberculosis, such as fencing off of domestic animals to prevent contact, and pasteurizing of milk to filter out any unwanted bacteria that can be passed through cattle's milk. There is also a vaccine for bovine tuberculosis called the BCG vaccine that helps preventing bovine tuberculosis. Alright kids, that's all the time we have for today, so let's say bye to our friend Mr. Buffalo. Bye, Mr. Buffalo! We hope you enjoyed our video presentation and learned a lot. Thanks and giggle. Humans
RIP.